Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where every story ignites hope and healing.
And the fire in the darkest night, a phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart.
All right, welcome to From the Ashes. I am your host, Valerie Beck, and today we have a really special guest. This is our first interview episode, and I have my longtime friend, Vega, here with me today. So before we jump in and I introduce I want to tell you a little bit of backstory. And I have been friends for 10 years now. We met through the LA dance community at what was Boogie Zone, and we've stayed in touch ever since, and we've seen each other grow in such unexpected ways. And today we both find ourselves in the wellness space as well as navigating our way through the artist space. So Ally is a movement coach and movement artist based in LA. She has choreographed and taught in the US and internationally. She came back from the Philippines earlier this year. And she is the director and founder of Ancestral Vision Movement and focuses on cultural street fusion. And we can unpack some of that together with her in this episode. So welcome, Ally. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yay, I'm really excited to, sit and chit chat and kiki with you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm really happy for you to be here. I think you're a perfect fit for From the Ashes, rising from the ashes of whatever obstacles we've been through to get stronger and to become more of who we truly are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That's an honor. Thank you. Thank you for what a compliment. Thank you. We both have been through all the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, but look at us. We're here, we're doing the thing. So yeah.
And we're still in the journey.
Totally
still right in the middle of it. It's there's so much growth to be had. So I want to start, first of all, if you could give us a little bit more background, because this podcast is about overcoming obstacles and creating ourselves anew. So what does that mean to you when you hear that?
Overcoming obstacles. To me, that means flowing, finding a good flow through life and finding the joy in the ebbs and flows. I think a lot of times because we live in this capitalistic state, it's very hard to find joy in the moments of lull, right? When there's not anything going on or there's no opportunities happening. And it's very easy to measure your worth in the lack of opportunities and experiences you're getting. So I feel like overcoming those obstacles is just allowing yourself to, find the joy and the peace when the vibes aren't necessarily high, when you don't have a crowd cheering for you, and that is a very hard practice. It's a daily practice, but it's a practice that I'm very much leaning into more these days.
Yeah. And I think we've both had our trials and tribulations. In my first episode, I talk about how I lost my sense of self when I stopped loving dance and how difficult that was because for years, my identity had been as a dancer and how to emerge from that and find myself anew. And then also how do I find myself anew as an artist again and find that love and passion again? Where did that go? So has there ever been a time in your life where you did feel lost, for somehow you had lost that spark?
Yeah. I think for me and the journey that I've been on and I'm currently on, it's not so much where I had this period of time where I just completely stopped. I kind of embarrassing and cringy to say it, but I am in the hustle and bustle of the LA life. And so my version of I lost myself, it on the external side, it just looks okay, she's grinding hard. But in the midst of grinding hard, I was definitely just like lost in the sauce. Like I was just kind of like saying yes to a lot of things
Mm.
because I'm like, well, I'm supposed to say yes. So yeah, but really in the midst of all that, what was going on was like I was just giving myself a bunch of busy work. So I was burning myself out. Like I was really, really burnt out from like 2019 to 2020. Like that was probably a very like probably one of the hardest years I've been through in my career because I was just really going hard at the paint, and like I was having barely any days off. I was just doing a bunch of gigs, like whether they were free or not free, or, and I was at that time, I was still building the foundation of Ancestral Vision Movement. So I was really grinding. And, to a lot of young artists who hear that, they're like, yeah, that's like what you're supposed to do. And like, there's truth to that, but there's also like, there is a balance you can find. And, I'm proud that now I have that balance. And that's something I'm working on very diligently. But back then it was tough. Like it was just me like burning myself out and like convincing myself like this is what it's supposed to be like. Like I'm
Mhm.
just supposed to be like hungry and broke all the time. Like I don't know what like narratives we're like feeding ourselves. It's just okay, life is not supposed to be this hard. You know what I mean? It really is not. So yeah, I'm glad I'm at a point where I'm like past that. But that was 2019 to 2020 was like, ooh, yeah, those are hard years.
Okay, so I have a few questions.
Sure.
So, at what point did and what was the thought when you realized that being hungry and broke was not it?
Yeah. Oh man. I think this is the first time I'm talking about it, but I'm glad I am because it's like a cautionary tale. So I, during that time, was collaborating. I'm going to use that word collaborating with a nonprofit in LA. And I was brought on as a contractor and soon to be a partner of that org to help not just create programming for them, but like also to help give Ancestral Vision Movement some foundation, right? Because when you're creating these new projects and especially a dance company, like you just need any kind of fiscal support possible. And so this org was promising that. And so there was a period of time I was there at this org pretty often, and we were collaborating on multiple initiatives that me as like standalone Ally was doing for them. But then I was also bringing Ancestral Vision Movement along with me. And I hit a breaking point with that org because ultimately our values did not match. And it was a very tumultuous time. This was the 2019 thing I was referring to earlier. And so, long story short, I became homeless for like a month, but it wasn't homeless. I'm saying that with air quotes only because like I have a tremendous support system here in LA. And so I was like staying with a friend during that. I wouldn't even say a month, maybe like 2 weeks. I was staying with a friend for 2 weeks while I was transitioning out. Long story short, with that, I was living in that org because it was supposed to be like a residency. And I was like transitioning out of there. I was staying with a friend for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I was like trying to find a place really quick. It was like anyone who knows what that feeling is of like, I don't have a place to live. How do I do this? It's like, I don't wish that feeling on anyone. That is like so stressful. And so
Mhm.
I remember that time, I was like still going to events, which is so insane. Like I was still going to like mixers, I was still doing appearances, red carpet type of stuff, and like going home to being like, I don't know where I'm living, which is like the most LA dystopian
Mhm.
thing you could ever hear. But like, yeah, that is literally what it's like out here. And yeah, I'm glad I made I made it through that. But wow, what a crazy time. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. That was like the breaking point though. It was like a breaking point where I'm like, this is a rock bottom. I need to figure out how to not rely so heavily on external people and stuff
Yeah.
like yeah.
Well, I cannot tell you how common
Yeah.
that is for dancers, but just a lot of people who come to Hollywood trying to make it. A lot of my friends have had similar stories to you.
Oh my God, right? Because it's like we're just the most vulnerable, you know what I mean? Like we come here, we're like vulnerable artists who are trying to obtain consistency and stability of any kind. So when you find it, you're like, oh my God, this is my ticket. And then when you realize you're like, oh no, I'm being exploited, it's like, uh-oh, what now? How do I save myself from this? And it's tough. It's tough. But I just, again, want to echo, like, I just have a really great support system out here in LA. And I'm really glad I have people that genuinely have my back. So when things go down, I know I can roll back onto different people here and there. And yeah, so I get it. It's tough.
Yeah.
Been there. Yeah.
So a follow-up question would be like,
Mm.
once you did hit that point,
Mm.
what shift in mindset happened and what action did you take that was different?
Ooh. That answer actually didn't come to me until later. And it was one of those things where I just kind of continued to hit the ground running. So a lot of times with patterns, right? You don't really know you're doing like a toxic pattern until you're like, wait a minute, this isn't working. And it might be like years down the line.
Yeah.
And like, from an outside perspective, someone's like, yeah, clearly you should have changed that. But like when you're like thick in the sauce, it's like you just can't see it. Right. And so when that happened, I think I definitely was still just kind of doing what I was always doing. I was just doing it in different spaces and I was moving around a lot. But it probably wasn't until I was doing workshops again, because when I was with that org, I was doing workshops in Historic Filipinotown. And that was my first taste at being like, okay, what does movement healing look like? Because that was basically the workshops I was doing with them. I was creating these like movement healing workshops. I wasn't a certified yoga instructor at that time. I was just a mover that knew that I was already engaging in like cultural fusion work. And so when this org asked me to create like a healing space through movement, I was like, yeah, that sounds like something I know how to do, even though I had no formal training in it. But basically, once that situation happened, I hit the ground running again. I started doing those workshops again. And as I continued to do those workshops, when the pandemic happened and everything stopped, I was able to be like, wait, okay, there's something aligned here. Like there's something missing. Like if I'm already engaging in this type of work that's integrating a lot of different disciplines, like it's not just creative movement, it's not even choreography at that point. It's ancestral, it's very instinctual, the thing that I'm missing is the spiritual aspect. And
Mhm.
thankfully during the pandemic, when everything stopped, shout out to People's Yoga, which I work for them. They offered a teacher training during that time. And I knew once I saw that, my soul just like, I leaped at the opportunity. I was like, I know I'm supposed to do this right now. Like in the midst of how crazy the shutdown was, I am meant to do this program amidst all of this chaos. And so I did. And thank goodness I did it because, now I'm also currently a yoga instructor and I love my life as that. It's adjacent to my dance jobs. But it really, like, that framework helped inform this work I do as like a cultural fusion artist. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Good. Yeah. So that kind of answers that question of like how you got into the wellness space. So it sounds like somebody already had recognized in you, like, this is something that she could be good at. And then you took that and further developed it.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
can see how like ancestral vision movement can be that vehicle for healing. And is that something that you saw when you started it?
It's interesting. No, not right away. I mean, even when I started Ancestral Vision Movement, it was never meant to be this like dance company. I never sought out to be like, I'm going to make this dance company because I believe I'm a dance director. Like, that was just never in the cards. But it ended up happening because once I made one piece, there was the first AVM piece I ever debuted was back in 2017. And it wasn't even called Ancestral Vision Movement back then. It was just, I was debuting a piece for a showcase and I knew I wanted to do cultural fusion work because I was inspired by my trip in the Philippines in 2016. And then that piece was then commissioned to be performed more at different spaces around LA. And that was when I knew, okay, I think I have something special. But at the time, it wasn't even an organized structural thing. It was just me being like, all right, let's just ask the homies who's free to do this thing with me. Like I really did that for a year. It's just insane. People are always shocked when they hear that because they're like, why didn't you just know like that was already a company at that point? And I was like, I didn't because I was just in denial. I was like, oh no, this is just Ali Vega and her friends doing a thing, which is it sounds so silly in retrospect. But like I really did function like that for a year until the end of 2018. I remember my cast, we were getting ready for a show in December, and the current cast I had at that time sat with me and like basically just was like, why don't you just make this official? And I sat there going like, yeah, you're right. There's like, why don't I make it official? Like, what is stopping me? And it really was fear. I was afraid to like create something this big because I was like, I just didn't know if I was capable of leading it, and I didn't know if I was qualified to lead something like this. But the reality was I was already doing it, right? I was already doing it without the title. But I just now with the title, I got so like nervous to put myself in that headspace. But I'm really glad I had a good group of friends at that time dancing with me because they grounded me. So I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where we're at now. And thank goodness.
Yeah. So you said something really interesting about like that fear and just not acknowledging your own power. I want to dig a little bit into that because I feel like that's something that I've definitely gone through and struggled with. And, to a certain point, probably still struggling with is how do you overcome that limiting belief and where do you think it comes from?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. It's a question that first has to start with a sigh out. Where do you think it comes from? I feel like it's the intergenerational trauma, especially if you're a person of color and you have immigrant parents. And it doesn't even matter how many generations your family's been here in the West. That carries over to you. And so when, I'm Filipino American and I'm second generation Filipino, which means my parents immigrated here. My dad immigrated here when he was a teenager, and my mom immigrated here when she was in her mid 20s. And so I come from like a whole lineage of colonized people, and how that carries over to the present is that yeah, trauma is stored in the body. Anyone who is an embodied movement worker like the two of us and anyone else who's listening knows that. If you don't work through that, it stays in the DNA and it gets passed down to generations after generations. And if you're not doing the internal work to break those curses and allow and liberate yourself, then it just continues to pass down, whether through your DNA or just whoever you're in community with. And so, yeah, that's where it comes from. How do you break it? Yeah, it's a daily practice. It's a daily practice of like knowing yourself so well, putting yourself first all the time. It's so hard, especially for like women of color. We're always taught we're the last on the list to be loved. You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
it's really hard to go against these teachings that we've been taught our entire lives, and to unlearn that and to choose ourselves first is very hard. It's like that's why I say it's a daily practice. I say that all the time in my yoga classes. There's a reason we call it practice, right? You have to like do it every day until that muscle is just like working itself naturally. But if you're unlearning something, this is going to feel so foreign on you in the beginning. And it does feel foreign, to say no to others and say yes to yourself. It feels selfish, which is insane because like men are not taught that. They're like, wow, that's so brave of you to say yes to all these things. But like for us as women, we're always taught like how dare you, and so to reject that narrative and to walk your own path is quite brave in this society. And so, yeah, I just think as long as we stay in that practice of healing ourselves, which in turn will heal others, which in turn ripples out to everyone around us, like that's how we break it.
I really like your answer. And I like that you say that it's a daily practice and like knowing self is really important because in the Yoga Sutras, they talk about self study.
Yes.
swadhyaya. And that knowing yourself, studying your own and getting to know your own intuition and felt sense is absolutely vital to your well-being.
Yes. And in a capitalist society, we are not taught to rely on that, right? That there's no monetary value in placing importance on intuition. And that's so dangerous, right? Because it's like, okay, if we're not placing it on intuition, then who the hell are we listening to? Right. And that is dangerous. That is just so dangerous because now your entire all of agency, all of choice is just not your own. So we're just answering to external beings that we don't even know. Like that's insane. And so yeah, to have that daily practice that the Yoga Sutras talk about of just answering self, knowing self so well, and taking the time to be still and really have that dialogue with yourself is just so vital in understanding how to break intergenerational curses.
Yeah. And, like you said, this is not something that we're taught to value. And it was only until I was like at rock bottom emotionally that I started to study my own thoughts and I started to study on my own patterns.
Yeah.
And so it's just like looking at my environment, the people around me, like they don't at all think about how they talk to themselves in their heads and how that impacts everything that they do and everything that happens to them in their life.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, like as embodied practitioners, it's you can only do so much for other people, because at the end of the day, it's such an internal practice. So if folks are not arriving to that journey on their own terms, it's like there's only so much like coaxing we can do out of people. And I've had to learn that the hard way as an instructor. It's look, I'm going to give tools. That's all we could do, right? It's like you just give tools and, whether you use it, that's on you. I'm here as a resource. These are tools, and it's tough because it's like it's hard to watch people self-destruct, right? And so, but yeah, part of doing this work is also knowing how to protect your own peace. And when you see people self-destructing out here because they just don't know how to trust their intuition and be with self and slow down, it's it's hard, but you kind of have to be like, well, you're dealing with that. I need to protect my peace. I've said all I needed to say. I can only help you. I can only throw so many like life vests for you until you're just covered in life vests and you're not using any of the life vests and you continue to drown. Like there's only so much, right?
Oh,
And
it's true. Yeah.
so true, right? And like, cause at the end of the day, they really do have to just be like, oh, I didn't realize how many life vests you've been throwing me. I'm fine now, and damn, it's tough. It's really tough. And I think for any embodied practitioners that are listening in, it's we're all doing our jobs, as long as you are practicing what we've been taught and you're applying it in your practice, both on and off the mat and in your daily lives, it's like we're doing the work, y'all. And I just wanted to validate people because I understand it could be so, frustrating to be like, how are these people around me just like not doing the thing, because like I totally get it. I still get, I'm in my ego too. I still get frustrated when people around me are not engaging in the practice and they're just like still engaging in very like self-destructive habits. And it's just like, okay, like I can't do anything for you until like you wake up, but that's like, I guess that's just part of the human
Yeah.
condition, right? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so I was teaching a mental health workshop this morning and with like a Ayurveda yoga perspective, and we were talking about the gunas, like the clarity and
Yeah.
the turbulence and the ignorance or darkness, right? And it's just that we cannot blame people for being where they're at.
Yes. Oh, that was such a hard pill to swallow when I first learned about that, especially when talking about intergenerational trauma and like offering that type of like radical acceptance to our parents because these are people that may or may not have hurt you. And so like coming to that awareness of we can't blame them for not knowing certain things, they're only equipped with so much and I'm speaking from like an immigrant experience, right? It's like I was born in this country with a very different upbringing and very, very different environment. So, of course, like I have a privilege of just knowing more. And so, yeah, it was tough to like come to that acceptance, and it took me years. It took me years, right? So it's like it took me like years of understanding myself as a person and going into therapy and like going into my yoga training and then taking time away to like be in the Philippines for 3 months. Like it took me a long time, and I'm still unpacking that now, and I'm learning a lot about it now. And for folks who are like wondering how to do that work, it's like you just really got to start now. There's no better time than now to really start listening to your inner desires, these questions that you're always like pushing down and these desires that you're pushing down. And you're like, I've always wanted to be a singer, but like, that's stupid. It's like, well, who said that was? And that's tough, right? Because those are like childhood wounds. It's tough that, when you confront it, but the brave thing is to confront it. It is. And then you can get past that and work through that and give yourself a new narrative to believe.
This gets me to a really interesting thought on desire versus need and how we're
Yeah.
conditioned to think only about needs and to push down our desires. And even spiritual texts say desires no sometimes, but how do you get beyond just a survival mode if you're only thinking about your needs?
Right. That's so true, because humans, like, no matter what spiritual practice anyone follows listening, it's like humans, like, we're ego driven beings. There's no version of us that's like, and I've erased it all, unless you're like a monk that's just like, away from society and all things. Right. But like, we are ego driven beings, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's okay to like lean into these desires of like, I do want to make 6 figures a year. And I think we just need to not shy away from those desires, because I feel like in wellness spaces, it's just so taboo to even say that, because it's like not being equitable and like, and it's like, okay, it's okay. There's a world where this balance can exist. And I'm not going to judge people unless they're trying to say like, I'm trying to be a billionaire. And that's like, okay, let's unpack that, sis. But but I'm like, but if you're just like, I desire good things in my life. I desire to like be loved and be taken care of and, live a soft life. What is wrong with that? If you think about like what our ancestors were doing, like, I mean, it's a very different time. They didn't have all this like glitz and glam and technology around them. So it's not like they had all these distractions, but like, well, who are we to say like they had no distractions whatsoever? Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, we are humans with ego, and like that is just normal. That's just normal. And I think the more we just lean into that and can control it, right? And
Mhm.
that's like what all these spiritual practices teach us, is like we need to manage it. So you're not just only driven by ego. There's so many spiritual practices that are like, yeah, don't do that. But like it's not like you can eliminate it completely. So I don't know. I think, yeah, sometimes the discourse that surrounds ego, like we
Mhm.
just really need to like check in with like how we're talking about it, because yeah, I'm not going to deny it. Like I want cool things. Like, and then what, you're going to tell me I'm a bad person? Explain that. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I feel like the narrative is definitely skewed. And again, going back to yoga philosophy, because like it just seems to have a lot of wisdom, is they talk about how fulfilling your dharma, right? Your higher calling or whatever it is being pulled actually creates the environment for abundance,
yes.
wealth,
Yeah.
which creates the environment for enjoyment and pleasure. And that's a natural progression. It's not taboo. It's so
Yeah. And it's not selfish. Yeah. Cause it's like, again, we're taught, if you're desiring these things and you're only working for the motivation of self, that's so selfish. Like, what about everyone on your behind you? And it's like, if you're elevating and you're connected with universe and other people around you, that natural progression, everyone else lifts up with you, And I think that's the narrative we need to be like really leaning into, because it can be so detrimental when people are like, oh, I can't want things because that's so selfish of me. But it's like, or if you deserve it, like what's wrong with that? Like, that's okay to want things. It's what's not okay is if you hoard it, right? Like if you
right.
get like success and you just like never share it with anyone, then yeah, like that's not good. And then yeah, we have a yoga sutra for that too, right? Like
Yep.
don't have like we can't be storing all this excess, you know? So we got to like trim it down, which means in like in a monetary sense, it's like, yeah, just give that back. That's it. Let that be cyclical. Let that energy cycle in, cycle out, cycle in, cycle. But like, what's wrong with having more energy? If you're pouring your heart and soul and your entire being back into the universe, like that is so much energy you're putting out there. Of course, you should be getting that back tenfold, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so I think again, yeah, the more we can lean into that discourse, the healthier we're all going to be. But again, yeah, folks, it takes a while for folks to arrive to this type of yeah, this discourse and this mentality because you're right, it does kind of take some sort of life-changing situation to happen, like whether it's like a rock bottom or some sort of abrupt life transition where you have time to really be with your thoughts and by yourself. And yeah, in a capitalistic society, it's very hard, right? Because it's like, when are people afforded that? You have to really, you know, one, want it, but two, also have the luxury of time to do that. And it's very hard in our country. Like, you know, and I can acknowledge my privilege as someone here in the US. Like, it's very hard. I mean, a lot of people are just living day to day. So it is very tough to like be afforded this luxury of like, well, now I'm going to think. But I personally believe, again, as people who study the sutras and who like use it as like a daily practice, there is always a way, even if it's 5 minutes of your day or 2 minutes of your day, or I mean, if you have more time, that's even better. But there is time. And I think those practices are there, those readings are there for us to understand how to apply it in the modern sense of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I want to dive a little bit more specifically into this abundance scarcity mindset with artists because it's a sticky situation and it's very common for artists to give everything away and take nothing for themselves,
Oh my God. Yeah.
especially dancers.
Especially dancers, especially dancers. Like, we're just like the tortured souls that are like, just take it all and it's okay if I never eat again. And it's like, why are we like this? Oh my God. Oh, it stresses me out. Yeah.
We very much are like collectively like this. And it's just so strange that, I mean, it just seems like a huge agreement that like none of us are going to make money.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, man, I think that's where we as folks who are dismantling systems of oppression, we really need to investigate what these jobs are to us. Like, what is our relation to these jobs? Because if you find value in this work, then that value deserves compensation, right? And everything is an exchange, whether there is a monetary exchange happening or an energetic exchange happening, there's always an exchange. And so when you start to see every interaction as that, then it's easy to be like, well, if I'm providing this service, whether it's in the form of like a performance or if you're teaching or whatever, then it's easy to be like, well, what's the exchange? Like, what am I getting out of it? And like, when you're being told like the exchange is like a peanut, then it's like, wait a minute, this makes no sense. It's not equal. And that's when folks can start to advocate for themselves, right? It's if I know I'm putting so much work into this craft and this organization is asking me to teach this, and this, and do it for this amount of money. And you're like, wait a minute, this is not adding up. Then we can feel empowered to be like, wait, no. Like, first of all, as a practitioner, this is how much I'm worth. And, you know, everyone could put a different price point on that. But again, it takes knowing yourself very well. So if you know, like, how many years of training you've been putting into the craft and how long you've been yeah, like refining your craft. Yeah, get your money's worth. Like, it doesn't matter if you're just a first year teacher and it's like, like I'm still a newbie at this. If you know you've been dancing for like over 10 years, that's experience. So use that. But like believe in it, believe in the value of that. And that's the other component. It's like when we're taught not to value these jobs, of course we're lowballing everything. Oh my God, this is like bringing up like a conversation I had with my dad recently. It's like, whoa, deja vu. Yeah, when we're just taught to see jobs as like, that's worth it, that's not worth it, that is low, that's not, it's like, or we could just see the value in all jobs. In all jobs, everyone is providing a service. From like the sanitation department to a CEO. There's a service being provided. So it's like we as a society can like create that number of what does that exchange look like? If this person is providing this service, like what is the value of that? And I think it's a powerful thing as people who have, voting rights here. Like we can set the price point, we can set the value, and we can create the discourse that surrounds that. And we don't have to just settle. Why are we out here being like, well, I'm a dancer and that's just what it is? Like it comes with the territory. We're always going to make peanuts. It's like, who said that? Like, why? Like I refuse to believe that. Like, I think our jobs are so incredibly hard and it takes a very special person to like do it for a living. So why on earth would I ever sit here and be like, yeah, this job is not valuable to society at all? I'm like, I would beg to differ. Society needs us. Oh my God, more than ever, they need us. People are like craving to be in their body. They're craving to like feel strong and empowered and liberated. And who better than a dancer to teach that? So yeah, they need us. They need us.
Absolutely. And I was looking at the other day, so there are different levels of things you can sell and the level of value people are willing to pay for them. So like goods are at the bottom, right? The tangible stuff. Then you have like the services, and then like all the way up at the top is transformation. It's the most valuable. And I think as dancers, we forget the transformational power of our movement and that we can change somebody's lives for the better.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Oh, I love it. That's being Yeah, as it should be, like I'm sure in your work, you've probably seen it. In my work, I've seen it too. It's like people want to be able to feel powerful in their body because that translates to all the other aspects in their life. That translates to them going to the DMV and being like, I'm confident walking in here and I know what the hell I'm supposed to be doing in here. It sounds so silly, but when you have this spiritual practice, you know that all of these things are connected. That's why when people see folks who have an embodied movement practice and we always walk with like such a presence into every room. Yeah, because we train ourselves to do that. It's not just like, like, oh, I woke up today and like, I guess I'm feeling confident. It's literally a muscle you're practicing. Like not even like, yes, it's a physical muscle you're stretching out, but it's a mental muscle you're like consistently visiting over and over and over until you like it's all connected, right? Like your mind, body, and soul are connected in this aligned belief that, okay, now every room, it doesn't really matter who I'm talking to. I'm always going to be in this centered ass place where I can speak from this. Yeah, like I'm speaking my truth no matter who I'm talking to. I don't have to code switch. I don't have to like feel small in this person's presence, but then I can feel big in this person's presence. It's like, no, I'm just the same version of myself in every situation. And it just takes a lot of practice to get to that. But that's why it's a practice.
Yeah. And I'll be the first one to say, because when I burned out on my dance career in 2016 and I stopped believing in the power of dance, I also stopped believing in myself. And I took a dance class the other day and I was going through like a rough day and I almost cried because I was like, when I step into this room, even if it's just taking class, I feel so unstoppable.
Yeah.
I see myself moving. I see the way that I can dance. I'm like, I am an entirely different person.
Yeah.
So, like if you know, it's.
I get Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Cause that's so real. That's so real. Like when whatever type of movement that you're engaging in, but specifically because we're both dancers, we really know this feeling very well. Once you're in it, it's like a meditation. It's a movement meditation, because you're allowing yourself to just trust instinct, trust your body, trust that like I'm moving in the way that I'm meant to move in this moment. No one else is forcing me to move. I'm moving. And that's such a power. It really is. In a society that like everything else is dictated by other things, how special is it as a mover to have the agency to move in the way you want? And yeah, to have that type of language and like movement training, you got to put in the work, right? It's, you want your body to be healthy and strong to do that, and to have that type of language to move like that, right? Whatever, however you're expressing. And so that's why it's a craft, you know, like not everyone can do it. Well, I want to rephrase that. Everyone has the capability of doing it. They just have to like step into that power and that belief and that mindset, you know,
Yes.
because right, because like I firmly believe it. But when I work with certain clients who are like, I can tell the narrative they're always telling themselves is like, I'm not meant to do this, and I can't, like, I see how you're moving and I can't move like that. There's only so much of like, who told you that? Like I can say, right? It's I want you to know that you are worthy of moving that way. You just got to like allow yourself and give yourself permission to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something I hope that more people can step into in this year of the dragon, you know, is like just giving themselves permission to have the audacity, to have the boldness to like step into these things and be that person. Just be that person. Like, oh, I take a dance class once a week. Like, be that person. Even if the rest of your family's like, I'm sorry, what are you doing? Like, who cares? I'm not, they're not living your life. Who
Yeah.
cares? You know, like the other day I was telling it was something new I've been doing is I started training in martial arts this year. And I've been training in it's I've been training in martial arts this year, and I've done it before, but this is my first time really seriously training in it. And it's been such a lovely journey because it's given me a whole other set of movement vocabulary that I haven't had before. I know how to tap into aggression as a dancer, but to tap into aggression as a martial artist, it's such a different mindset. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've been having a lot of fun with lately is like now I can express aggression and rage in this way. And it feels really liberating. It feels so good. It's like very cathartic, you know, because I'm like, oh my God, this like powerful, this feeling I'm feeling, or I'm like, I want to like punch something. And now I have the technique and like the framework to do it, you know? That's what movement training is. That's how powerful it can be. It's so cool, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as a dancer, as a mover, as an artist, as a movement artist, like we can have that framework to, you know, do this type of work in.
Yeah. Are you doing Filipino martial arts?
I am. I'm doing
Okay.
Filipino martial arts, and it's been so lovely. And because I've been training with a friend of mine who has been an instructor for years. She doesn't teach at any spaces anymore. She just does it. She does like privates with friends and stuff. Shout out to Nikki. And yeah, no, I tell her after every session, I'm like, man, I feel like so badass right now. Like I really, I leave going like, and you know, for audio listeners, I'm like popping my collar right now. You know, like I leave going like, period, you know, and I want everyone to feel that. Like when it like boggles my mind when people are like, I don't like when they hear me say that and they're like, I've never felt that. And I'm like, why? You should be able to access that feeling. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a martial arts form. You could do that with anything. Like you could put on a jacket and be like, yes. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
But like everyone should have access to those feelings. Like you are so worthy of accessing those feelings, expressing it so unapologetically. Like I wish that for us all.
Yes, absolutely. And I totally feel you on the martial arts too, because like capoeira helped me with that. And the way that capoeira is, it's so dependent on the people around you.
Yes. Yeah.
And you have to be present. Like when you're dancing, you actually don't have to be present to anyone but yourself a lot of the time because it's not social
Yeah.
and you don't have anyone to spar with unless you're doing like something in, I don't know,
Totally.
a battle. But
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but when it comes to sparring, you have to be very aware. If someone is going to swipe over
Yes.
at your head, you need to
Yeah.
duck, right? And it's just like recognizing also the energy and the reaction that you have to being swiped at.
Yes. Yes.
Because some of us do not take that well.
Yeah.
Right. Or if we get nicked, we do not take that well. And just like we really have to check our reactions to things too. So adds another level of self-awareness.
I agree. Yeah. Oh, I love this layer that we're bringing in. Yeah, it's totally true. Like, you have to be so hyper aware of your surroundings and like, and with movements like capoeira and Filipino martial arts, FMA for short, it's like there's like a rhythm to it. And so if you're not really listening and diving deep into that rhythm and feeling connected to it, you're right, you will get nicked. And that's like, oh, that sucks. Like it's like you just don't want to ever feel, no one ever wants to feel that, because then you'll feel like inadequate. You'll be like, I could have easily blocked that. I'm not sure why I'm like not doing well, but that's why I love martial arts, because it really does bring in this like additional framework of, I mean, yes, have like heightened sense of your surroundings, and then just being powerful in your body, which again, dance and other forms of movement can also bring. You're completely correct in that like martial arts provides it in a sense of like you have to do it with other people. So it's like you have to be connected to the other people around you, whether it's a person you're sparring with or like you're just doing it in community with one another. It's such a great practice to help you feel present. And I love it.
Yes. So the last topic that I wanted to touch on is Asian American identity and mental health. And I think this ties back to Ancestral Vision Movement too. And just like navigating mental health as an Asian American has been tricky. And I've noticed this for myself is that even though I have been such a champion of mental health my entire career since I've been in college, I still don't necessarily, like I've barely seen any therapists. Like I've very much done my own wellness journey, and it's like hard for us to ask for help.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I completely understand and agree. It is hard. We're not taught that in many of our cultures, which is, it's kind of interesting to see that because, Asia is so big, right?
Mhm.
But like collectively, we all have a very common experience of like our families not having the bandwidth to engage in that. How do I prioritize like my mental well-being? Yeah, so many of us, especially if you come from like communities of like, and like, yeah, your parents are immigrants, or if they are immigrants and they come here and they're just trying to like create stability, and if they're working a lot and if there's a language barrier, there's other factors at play. And the last thing on their to-do list is like, do I feel good today? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
and that's what makes me sad that that's just like the last on their to-do list because, they're in survival mode. And that's why, like, for us as diaspora, it's so important to like, because we've been given this opportunity of being born here, at least like in my experience, I'm born here. And so I have a different framework from like what my parents, how they grew up in. And so because I have that privilege, it's like, it is my duty to embody that and then share that with everyone around me and teach it to the next generation. And it is hard. It is incredibly hard because if people are not tending to their childhood wounds, this is a very hard journey to walk because then we're just living in this narrative of, my mom doesn't believe in me and I'm like, I'm hurt, like you're just living that narrative over and over and over. And I see it all the time in like Asian American adults,
Mhm.
like let alone Asian American artists.
Yeah.
That's a whole other community. But really, it's like, yeah, like we're just looking for validation because our parents didn't give it to us. And it's just like, oh, it's so rough. That's why community is so important and crucial. And, that's why on a tangent here, I get frustrated when I hear people talk about LA being a very lonely city and everyone's just so like fake and not trustworthy. And I get so like, man, you're just looking in the wrong places because there's so much love and community here. And when you lean into it wholeheartedly, that could be a place where chosen family could be found,
Mhm.
and if you allow yourself to really lean into those spaces for support. But if we have our guard up all the time and we're just walking around like really in our childhood wounds, like if we're just coming from that place, then of course you're just going to be like everyone's cold here. But it's like
Yeah.
you're cold here, like it's like it starts with you. Like if you're putting that energy out, then of course it's reflected back at you. But if you come with an openness for
Mhm.
love and experiences and opportunities, then like that gets reflected back to you. But of course, like, the moment you're open, of course, you're vulnerable to anything. So yes, you will get hurt, but like know that it's like not the end of the world. And that's why having community is so important, because it's like when you do have those moments of being betrayed and feeling hurt, then like, hey, I have people that have my back
Mhm.
when it's not feeling great right now, like when it's really rough. I've been through those times. I mean, I mentioned it earlier once, but there was like so many other times outside of that one time where I've like really felt a rock bottom, and I've really felt inadequate and not loved and not worthy. But, the common thing that has like really kept me going has been to lean into community and like know that there's support there. And so I hope Asian Americans can continue to find that sense of belonging. Everyone is coming at it from a different lens, right? So it's like your proximity to your culture. Like some
Mhm.
of us, if you grow up in it, you're like, oh, that's easy. There was Asian people around me all times. I was at a festival all the time. It's like it's so for some folks it's easy, but for folks who are coming from like other parts of the country where maybe you were the only Asian person at your school, and you've had to like there's like pressure to assimilate, then it is hard, right? Because you're like, I feel weird like stepping into that. I don't feel worthy. And like those are just examples of like stuff I've heard, which it's sad, but I can also understand that as someone who, I was once young and I also once felt that way. I understand that feeling, but just know that you're to any Asian American listening to this, you're totally one, welcome, and two, worth it. Like you
Yeah.
are so worthy of like claiming your culture.
Yeah.
This is not like cool kids club that you're like, oh, you're not loud. You're too Americanized. It can't be here. Like that
Yeah.
type of toxic thinking, just throw it away. Please just
Please
throw it
do.
away. Yeah, throw it away, reject it, because it's like it's not beneficial to anyone. Who is that benefiting other than like white supremacy? Let's be real, right? So you can throw that away and reject it and know that it's never too late to step into your cultural identity, and it's never too late to feel that sense of belonging. And so, because I know maybe folks listening to this might be like, I don't know where to start. Just literally go to like one event, maybe one festival, one night market, whatever it is. It sounds silly, but it's not. It's like if it's a place where people are gathering, just go and see what's up. And if you're like, this feels awkward, but also I'm interested and curious about what this is, then just stay. Like listen to that curiosity and stay, because you belong there. You belong there even if you're like, this isn't me. Like it is you. And it doesn't have to necessarily, if you're like, let's say you're at an open mic and people are talking about things that you're like, I don't know how to relate to this. Like, it's okay if you're like, your entry point is just, well, I was at a night market and people are just eating cool things. Stay there, right? Just stay there. And then you can like work your way into other spaces, and other forms of expression, because that's really how all of us start. I actually got asked the other day because, I am someone that is proud of my community and I'm very heavily involved in many community spaces. I got asked like how I did it. And I'm like, what do you mean? How did I do it? Like I am this, therefore I was there. And this was like a BIPOC person, asking me that. I'm like, just go. You deserve to go. Like, if this is where people of color are congregating and are like, engaging in these forms of expression, whether it's like forms of dance or like cinema, filmmaking, poetry, like go, just go. Even if you're like, your first experience is like, I am a fly on the wall here because I feel so awkward. That's fine. just just go and then see how you can continue to like feel at home there. But anyways, I bring all that up because it ties into the mental health
Mhm.
aspect. If you don't see yourself as someone who belongs, then it's hard to like engage in that part of yourself when you're going through mental health, like when you're
Yeah.
or talking about or engaging in your own mental health, right? It's if you feel like I'm like out of my body, all the time, then of course it's hard to be like, how do I take care of my body? So,
And so this just ties back into a very general mental health conversation because I went to a trauma conference last year and there was a presenter that said that the antidote to trauma is belonging.
mm. Oh, I love that.
Right? When we don't feel like we could trust anybody else and when we don't feel like we can trust ourselves, then who do we have?
Right.
And I think as an Asian American, I've always felt different levels of belonging
Yeah.
with people because I have a very complicated history of like growing up in a non-Asian neighborhood and then moving to a more Asian neighborhood and not feeling like I fit into either of those.
Right.
And it's just like at some point you do have to just embrace yourself and acknowledge that no matter where you go, you do belong.
Yeah.
You do belong.
Absolutely.
And you have your own unique power. And that's all you
Yeah.
need. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a journey. Like I know we keep using that word and we also keep using the word practice, but both of those things are just it's so true here. It's people don't like wake up and are like already this enlightened being. It takes work. I just want to encourage folks, don't be afraid to do the work. The work is there for you to do and it can be fun and such a beautiful experience because if you find people like other like-minded people around you that are also doing the same work, this could be so healing and so fun. And that's what Ancestral Vision Movement really is like it's a bunch of dancers that are doing this work side by side of understanding our identity, understanding our positionality in this country, and how all of those experiences as diaspora kids that are not in our motherlands, how that all connects and how that comes out in the form of movement. Like that work is so important. It's like, it's more important than like, if the arms are clean, like who cares about that at that point?
Mhm.
It's what's important is like, do you understand why these two movements that we're using in this piece, whether it's like, it's a traditional piece and we're using like voguing to like weave the two things together, like, why are we doing that? And I think once we get to that place of discourse and like investigation, right? If we're just like really asking ourselves these questions of why do these two things matter to me? Yeah, it gets you to a place where you can open up and ask about all the other aspects of your life of like, why does this matter to me? It's all about self-discovery. And if you allow yourself to just ask questions and allow yourself to answer that and give yourself these answers, it just makes you a more enlightened being. And ultimately, like we've talked about earlier with the Yoga Sutras, it just contributes to your dharma. It just contributes to this overall like, oh, your purpose here is to know yourself. Yeah. And you are so many different shades and you should get to know all those different shades while you're here on this earth. You don't have to be like, only this shade matters because of that. The society only values this part. And then the other parts, they don't value that. So why would I talk? It's like, you value that. That's it. You just place the value in that. And
Yeah.
that's it. Exactly.
I love
Mm.
it. I
Hey,
think that's a beautiful place to end.
thank you.
It's been a really great conversation. I feel like we probably need a part two at some point as we keep going through our journey.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Allie. So tell us what do you have going on in terms of projects? Where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple things. Please follow Ancestral Vision Movement on Instagram. It's just one word, Ancestral Vision Movement. I also shout out to my new training program I just started last year. It's called Femessence, my personal training program that's geared towards women, femmes, and non-binary folks to express movements in a liberated way. It's a creative movement program, and yes, it's mainly dance, but I use a lot of different forms to kind of inform the dancing. And so my next workshop is coming up soon, either in May or June, but please follow Femessence dot movement. That's what the Instagram handle is, femessence.movement on IG to stay up to date with that. And then if you want to follow just me, I am underscore Ally Vega on Instagram.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in to From the Ashes. We will see you next time.